The forgotten cry. The signal drifted across the endless dark of space. It was weak, broken, filled with static, but the words inside it were clear enough to chill anyone who heard them. We beg for help. Our world burns. If no one comes, we will all die. For weeks, the cry moved from one star system to another. It reached the great trade stations, the colonies of proud empires, and the ears of rulers who commanded fleets of warships. Yet every time the message was heard, the same thing happened. Silence. The Kalari Empire heard the plea. Their leaders listened for a moment, then shut the channel. Their war is not our war, they said. Let them fall. We will not waste ships on strangers. The Drosk Alliance received the message next. Their admirals laughed. Why should we risk our fleets? We gain nothing by saving them. Their death will not harm us. The Council of the Stars, the most powerful gathering in the galaxy, heard the same desperate words. They whispered among themselves. Some felt pity. Others only felt greed. In the end, they agreed on one decision. Do nothing. The fire will not reach us. Let it burn. So the signal kept moving, passing world after world, always ignored. The cry for help was slowly fading into silence. The people who had sent it were still screaming, but no one cared to listen. Their cities were burning, their sky filled with black smoke, their oceans red with ash. Every hour, more lives were lost. Every day, hope slipped further away. And then, the signal reached Earth. Far from the great empires, on a quiet blue planet, an old radio array still sat on a mountaintop. It was mostly forgotten, a relic of earlier centuries when humans searched the stars hoping to find proof that they were not alone. The dish still turned, scanning the heavens, and one night, it caught the dying signal. Inside the small control room, a single man sat listening. His name was Commander Hayes. He was not a politician, he was not a famous general. He was simply a man who had spent his life searching the skies, waiting for the day Earth might hear a voice from beyond. When the signal arrived, broken and weak, he almost thought it was a mistake. But then he heard the words, "Please. Anyone. They are killing us, we cannot hold. If no one comes, we will all die." Hayes froze, his hands shook. This was no trick of static. This was real. Someone far away was begging for help. He played the message again, then again, each time feeling the same sharp pain in his chest. He could almost hear the fear in their voices. He whispered to himself, "Why has no one answered?" For days, he worked alone, cleaning the signal, tracing its path through the stars. The origin was far, beyond the borders of any known human colony, a world unknown, yet filled with voices that refused to stop screaming. Hayes knew he could not keep it to himself. He sent the recording to Earth's leadership. Soon the signal was played in the halls of power. Presidents, generals, and council members sat in silence as the voice echoed through the room. "Help us. Please. Anyone." The room was cold when it ended. Some of Earth's leaders frowned. "It is not our concern. This is not our war." Others leaned forward, anger flashing in their eyes. "No one else has answered. Are we to sit and watch them die?" The debate began. Some argued Earth was still rebuilding from its own wars. Others said the galaxy had never shown kindness to humanity. Why should humanity show kindness now? But there were also those who remembered. They remembered Earth's history, a history filled with battles where humans had stood alone against impossible odds. They remembered a truth written deep in their blood. Humanity did not turn away from cries for help. And in that room, among the noise of arguments and fear, one sentence was spoken that cut through all the doubt. "If we do not answer, then no one will." Back in his small control room, Commander Hayes stared at the stars outside the window. He thought about the message. He thought about the people who were still waiting, still hoping that someone, somewhere, might come for them. He whispered softly, as if they could hear him across the endless dark, "Hold on. You are not alone anymore. And for the first time, the signal did not fall into silence. For the first time, someone was listening. Earth debates. The signal had shaken the halls of power. For the first time in years, Earth's leaders gathered under one roof. The chamber was vast, filled with rows of officials, generals, scientists, and diplomats. The recording of the alien plea played once more, echoing off the walls. They are killing us. If no one comes, we will all die. When the message ended, silence followed. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. Finally, a voice broke the stillness. It was General Whitaker, commander of Earth's defense fleet. His face was hard, carved with years of war. "This is not our fight," he said flatly. "We know nothing of these people. Their enemies are not ours. Why should we send our ships to die for strangers?" Murmurs of agreement rose across the chamber, but another voice rose above them. A woman in a navy blue suit, President Elena Marlowe. Her eyes burned as she leaned forward. "Because no one else will," she said. "Because the galaxy has already turned its back. And because if we stand by and watch, we are no better than those who ignored us when Earth cried for help in its darkest days." Her words struck like thunder. Memories stirred in every person present. Humanity had suffered too. Wars, invasions, famine. In those moments, no one had come to help them. Humanity had survived because they had no choice but to fight on their. Now another people were facing the same. Arguments exploded. Admiral Chen, calm but firm, said, "We must think of our own people first. Our fleets are strong, but they are not endless. If we send them into an unknown war, we risk everything. Earth may be next." Dr. Aidan Ross, a scientist, countered, "And if we do nothing, the invaders will grow stronger. Today, they burn someone else's world. Tomorrow, they might burn ours. Helping them may be the only way to stop a greater war." Back and forth, the voices clashed. Some demanded caution. Others demanded action. The chamber filled with heat, with fear, with fire. Commander Hayes sat quietly at the edge of the room, listening. He was not a politician, not a leader, but he had carried the signal here. His chest tightened as he watched the arguments unfold. All he could hear in his mind were the cries from the recording. "Help us. Please." The debate stretched into hours. Screens glowed with data, the coordinates of the alien world, the known strength of the enemy, the risks to Earth. One senator slammed his hand against the table. "We cannot risk the lives of our sons and daughters for a war that is not ours." President Marlowe stood again. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "You speak of risk. I speak of responsibility. History will remember this moment. It will remember whether humanity was silent or whether we rose." The room fell quiet. Every eye turned to her. She continued, "We know pain. We know loss. That is why we cannot turn away from it when we see it in others. If we ignore this plea, then we betray what it means to be human." At last, the decision was put to a vote. One by one, the names lit up on the screen. Aye or nay, the chamber held its breath. When the final mark was made, the result was clear. Humanity had chosen. The order was given. Earth would send a fleet, not for conquest, not for glory, but because no one else would. Across Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Soldiers were called back to their bases. Engineers worked day and night to ready the great warships. Families wept, proud yet afraid, as their loved ones prepared to leave for the stars. And through it all, the alien plea played again and again, a reminder of why humanity was going. If no one comes, we will all die. But now, for the first time, someone was coming. Commander Hayes stood on the viewing deck of the first departing ship. He watched as the engines came alive, burning like white fire in the darkness. He whispered softly, "You asked for help. Humanity has heard you. Hold on. We are coming." Above Earth, fleet after fleet rose into the night. their trails glowing like falling stars. They carried no promise of safety, only the promise that humanity would not ignore the cry. The galaxy had turned away, but Earth was coming. Arrival at the burning world. The human fleet traveled through the silent dark, their engines glowing like pale fire. Ship after ship moved together, carrying soldiers, weapons, and the heavy weight of a choice that could not be undone. For many of the young soldiers, it was the first time they had left Earth. For the older ones, it was a march into the unknown. Weeks passed as they crossed the stars. Inside the warships, men and women trained, sharpened blades, checked rifles, and whispered about the alien voices that had called them here. None of them knew what they would find. Some prayed. Some simply clenched their fists and waited. Finally, after long nights and endless silence, the coordinates appeared on their screens. The target system was close. The fleet slowed. Shields rising, weapons warming. Every heart beat faster. When the human ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, they saw it. The world below was burning. From orbit, the soldiers could see whole continents wrapped in flame. Cities were broken, black smoke climbing into the sky. Where there had once been green rivers and shining oceans, there was now only ash and blood. The desperate signal had not lied. This world was dying. Commander Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute. His hands gripped the railing as the image of the planet filled the main screen. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the engines. Then Admiral Chen gave the order. "Bring us into orbit. Scan for survivors." The scanners lit up with thousands of signals. Refugees were fleeing into caves, hiding among ruins, gathering on rooftops where they waved scraps of cloth toward the sky. They had seen the ships. They had seen the fire of Earth arriving, and they wept. But the humans were not alone in orbit. Enemy warships circled the burning planet like vultures. Their hulls were jagged, black, covered in scars from battles already won. Their weapons glowed red, still hot from the slaughter below. When the human fleet appeared, the enemy ships turned. Their formation shifted, engines roaring as they prepared for battle. The bridge of the Resolute shook as alarms blared. "Enemy fleet detected," the officer shouted. "At least 30 warships, heavily armed." Admiral Chen's eyes narrowed. "So, we meet them here." Below, on the surface, the survivors looked up through the smoke. They had expected more silence, more abandonment. Instead, they saw something impossible. A fleet of strangers standing between them and death. Children pointed at the glowing ships in the sky. The elders whispered in disbelief. Some fell to their knees, crying. Someone came. Someone finally came. The enemy commander, aboard a massive dreadnought, stared at the human fleet with cold amusement. His species had crushed a dozen worlds without challenge. No one had dared interfere. Now, newcomers had appeared. Small, unknown, fragile compared to the great powers of the galaxy. He laughed. "Fools, they will burn like the rest." Orders were barked. Enemy ships moved into formation, weapons locking on. On the Resolute, Commander Hayes felt his chest tighten. This was it, the first clash. Humanity had not come for glory, but the choice had already been made. There would be no turning back. "Admiral." Chen's voice rang across the fleet. "To all ships, this is Earth's first stand beyond our borders. Remember why you are here. Remember the voices that called us. We fight not for conquest, but for life. Hold the line." The humans roared. Their answer. Soldiers pounded fists against armor. Pilots gripped their controls, eyes burning with focus. And then, the sky lit up. Enemy warships fired first. Red beams cut across space, striking against human shields. Explosions rocked the fleet, shaking decks, throwing soldiers to the ground. "Shields holding," came the report. Admiral Chen gave the order, her voice steady as steel. "Return fire." The humans answered with fire of their own. Missiles streaked across the void, guided with deadly precision. Cannons thundered. Lasers burned bright. 1, Enemy warship cracked in half, torn by the fury of Earth's guns. The survivors on the planet below looked up, their tears mixing with ash as the sky erupted in light. For the first time in months, they felt hope. The battle had only begun. Enemy was fierce and their numbers great, but humanity had arrived with fire in their hearts and iron in their hands. On the surface, a young alien girl clutched her mother's arm and whispered, her voice trembling. "Who are they?" Her mother, staring at the glowing ships above, answered with a single word. Humanity. Humanity's fire. Unleashed, the first strike had shaken the enemy. A warship, proud and strong, now burned in pieces, drifting into the void. But the battle was far from over. Enemy cannons roared again. Red fire poured into the black sky, slamming against human shields. The decks of Earth's ships rattled, alarms screaming. The void lit up with thunder and flame. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Chen stood firm, her voice steady. "Focus fire on their lead ship. Break their line." Human ships moved with sharp precision. Squadrons of smaller frigates darted through the battlefield, weaving between heavy beams. Larger cruisers advanced slowly, their cannons hammering at enemy hulls. Explosions lit the void, pieces of metal spinning away like dying stars. The enemy fleet fought back with ferocity. One human frigate took a direct hit, its shields collapsing. Flames tore through its hull. The crew did not cry out. They simply drove their burning ship forward, ramming into an enemy destroyer. Both vessels vanished in a ball of white fire. On the ground below, survivors lifted their heads as the sky erupted. They had lived under fire for months, hiding in ruins, waiting for the final day. Now they saw strangers bleeding for them, fighting for them, and their hearts shook with a strange, forgotten feeling. Hope. The battle turned brutal. Enemy ships swarmed, trying to overwhelm the humans with numbers. Yet the human fleet fought like wolves, coordinated, fierce, unrelenting. Every loss only hardened their fury. Then the order came. Deploy ground forces. Dropships tore free from the fleet, their engines blazing as they descended into the smoke-filled sky of the dying world. Inside, soldiers gripped their rifles, faces grim. None had ever seen this planet before. None had met the people they were about to save. But they carried no doubt. Humanity had chosen. Humanity would not abandon them. The first dropships crashed into the ruined streets. Ramps slammed down. Human soldiers poured out, armored and ready. The air was thick with ash and the stench of burning flesh. Towering buildings lay in ruins, shadows of a once great city. Enemy troops stalked the streets, tall and armored, their weapons glowing. They turned in surprise as humans hit the ground running. The clash was instant. Gunfire cracked through the ruins. Human rifles spat steel and fire. The enemy roared, charging with brutal blades and heavy cannons. But humanity did not break. They moved as one, covering each other, pushing forward, every step leaving another enemy corpse on the blood-soaked ground. One soldier, Sergeant Vale, pulled a young alien child from the rubble, shielding him with his own body as shots ripped through the street. He shoved the boy toward safety, then rose to fire again. "Go! You're safe now!" The alien mother fell to her knees, tears cutting through the dust on her face. No one had ever protected them. No one. Until now. Above, the battle in orbit raged on. Human warships pushed deeper, breaking through enemy lines. Every blast of cannon fire was followed by the crack of missiles, each strike tearing holes into the dark fleet. Yet Earth's ships bled as well. Hulls burned, decks split, lives ended in silence. But still the humans fought. Admiral Chen gave no room for fear. "They wanted to erase this world," she said coldly. "Show them Earth's answer." The human flagship Resolute cut through the battlefield, its cannons firing in unison. An enemy dreadnought cracked under the fury, explosions racing down, its spine until it split apart in the void. Cheers echoed across the comms. Humanity had struck a wound deep into the enemy. On the ground, the battle grew even harsher. The enemy realized too late that humanity had come not just with ships but with fire in their hearts. Human tanks rolled through shattered streets, their cannons blasting apart armored beasts. Infantry fought room to room, pulling survivors from beneath rubble, guarding them with their own lives. The invaders had expected fear. What they found was rage. One alien soldier, battered and bleeding, looked at the humans holding the line. He whispered to his people, "They fight for us." "But why? We are not theirs." No one had an answer. Hours dragged on. Smoke filled the skies. The battle raged in orbit and on the ground, but slowly, the enemy faltered. They had crushed weaker races before. They had burned planets without resistance. But they had never faced this. They had never faced humanity. Human losses were heavy, but their spirit did not break. Every soldier who fell was replaced by another, pushing forward with the same defiance. Every ship that burned only lit the fire brighter in those who remained. By nightfall, parts of the city were secure. Refugees huddled inside buildings now, guarded by human soldiers. For the first time in months, they slept without the shadow of slaughter. Above them, the fleet still fought. But hope now burned as bright as the fire of Earth's guns. As dawn rose over the broken world, Commander Hayes looked out from the bridge of the Resolute. The planet was still in flames, the enemy still strong, but he could feel it. The tide was turning. He whispered, "They called for help. Humanity has answered." And in that moment, across fire and ash, across blood and fear, a legend began to grow. The galaxy had ignored the plea, but humanity had unleashed its fire. The fire awakens. The fleets of the enemy moved closer, their ships dark shapes against the stars. They looked like shadows stretching across the galaxy, swallowing light. Every world they passed fell silent. No one had stopped them. No one had slowed them. And then, Earth answered. At first, the galaxy thought it was madness. Humanity was small, young, fragile compared to ancient empires. How could they rise when others had fallen? But in their silence, something stirred. The forgotten cry of help, ignored by all, became a spark in human hearts. They remembered their own past, the wars they had fought, the ruins they had rebuilt, the oceans they had crossed with nothing but hope. Humanity did not rise with words. They rose with fire. From the dark of Earth's orbit, ships launched one by one. Old names returned, painted on the sides. Valor, defiance, eternal dawn. These were not just warships. They were symbols. Every human who looked up at the sky that night whispered the same vow. Never again will cries go unanswered. The first clash came quickly. The enemy fleet expected an easy strike. They saw only humans, small, untested, alone. But when fire met fire, the sky lit up in ways no one had seen before. Humanity's weapons burned brighter, not because they were stronger, but because they carried something more, the will to fight for those who had no voice. In the shadows of space, the enemy staggered for the first time. The galaxy, watching from afar, felt something they had not felt in centuries. The turning point. The enemy had never been stopped before. For thousands of years, they had burned through civilizations like storms across dry fields. Worlds fell, empires surrendered, species vanished. To them, the galaxy was nothing but a path of endless conquest. But then came the night when the shadows met fire humanity. The galaxy had expected Earth to fall in silence. Instead, they rose in thunder. Their ships, though fewer, moved with deadly purpose. They fought not for glory, not for power, but for survival, and something more. They fought for those who had been silenced, for every voice that had cried out and been ignored. The first battle lasted 3 days, 3 days of fire across the void, as explosions painted the stars red and gold. The enemy came with numbers, endless waves of steel and death. Humanity came with will. Every time a human ship fell, another rose to take its place. Every time the enemy thought they had crushed resistance, humans struck back harder. They learned, they adapted, they turned wreckage into weapons, traps into opportunities. On the third day, when the smoke cleared, the impossible had happened. The enemy fleet broken, their forward assault stalled. For the first time in living memory, they had been forced to retreat. The galaxy trembled. Across distant worlds, leaders stared in disbelief. "How can this be?" they whispered. Civilizations that had bowed to fear now watched with wide eyes. Tiny Earth had done what no empire had dared. Humanity had taken the fire into their hands and forced the darkness back. But victory came at a cost. On Earth's orbital stations, the wounded lay in rows. Ships burned in silence, drifting across the stars. Families wept, soldiers mourned, and the price of survival was heavy. Yet even in sorrow, there was no despair. Instead, there was a strange, unshakable unity. Every voice across Earth carried the same promise. We will not stop here. The galaxy waited. Would Earth fall back into silence? Would they lick their wounds and hide as others had done? Or would they rise higher? The answer came swiftly. Earth did not rebuild in secret. They rebuilt in the open, under the gaze of the galaxy. Factories roared. Foundries burned day and night. New ships were born, larger and sharper, carrying names that echoed with history: Unbroken, Avenger, Last Light. Each ship was more than steel. It was a story, a memory, a vow made flesh. And humanity did not fight alone. Something had shifted. Across distant stars, small voices began to rise. Races once silenced found their courage again. Colonies that had been abandoned whispered, "Maybe we are not alone anymore." Fleets that had once turned away now sent quiet signals toward Earth. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy dared to hope. The enemy, however, was not finished. They returned, stronger, vaster. Their fury doubled. A tide of shadows stretched across space once again, aiming straight at the little blue world that had humiliated them. This was not just war anymore. This was vengeance. The second great battle began at the edge of the Sol system. The galaxy held its breath. The enemy expected fear. They expected humanity to tremble before the endless swarm. But what they found instead was silence. Calm, steady silence across human channels. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot spoke with one voice. For those who cried out and were never heard, we fight. The sky ignited. Missiles streaked like meteors, plasma fire carved through the dark, and gravity itself bent under the clash of forces. Human ships weaved like hunters, cutting deep into enemy lines, striking where it hurt most. For every human ship lost, 3 enemy vessels burned. The battle raged for weeks. Entire moons shattered under the fire. Stars seemed to dim under the weight of destruction. Yet humanity did not break. And then, the moment came. At the heart of the enemy fleet, their command vessel stood like a fortress, black and unshaken. Every empire before Earth had struck against it and failed, but humanity was different. They did not strike with just weapons, they struck with defiance. A single ship, the Eternal Dawn, broke through enemy fire. Engines burning, hull torn apart, it rammed straight into the enemy's command vessel. The explosion was so bright it turned night into day across nearby worlds. When the light faded, the impossible had happened again. The enemy's fleet, leaderless, broken, scattered. Their war machine, shattered. The galaxy erupted. On distant worlds, voices cheered. Species that had given up hope cried tears of fire and light. For the first time in an age, the shadow had been wounded beyond repair, and Earth stood tall. The galaxy would remember this turning point for eternity. The day when silence was broken. The day when the forgotten cry of the weak was answered. The day when humanity, small and fragile, rose as giants. They were no longer just a young species. They were the fire the galaxy had been waiting for, and the shadows knew it. For the first time in their endless conquest, the enemy felt fear, hope, the final dawn. The galaxy burned. Stars lit the sky with the smoke of war. Human ships, black as night, moved like shadows through fire and wreckage. No other world had answered Earth's plea. No other hand had reached out in mercy. But humanity had risen, alone, fierce, and unbroken. The Empire still held many systems. Their armies were vast, their fleets endless. But after every battle, whispers grew. Whispers of humans who fought like fire. Humans who refused to kneel. Humans who carried the forgotten cry of the weak in their hearts. And those whispers spread like sparks across the stars. On a ruined station near the edge of Empire space, survivors watched. Broken races, once slaves, gathered in silence. They saw the smoke of the latest battle. They saw the human fleet rising from the wreckage, torn but still flying. One child spoke first. "They fight for us." An elder trembled. "No, they fight for themselves." But another voice, softer and stronger, whispered, "They fight because no one else would." And so the broken began to rise. The human fleet prepared for its final strike. Captain Rains stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes burning with sleepless fire. "This is the end," he said. "The Empire thinks fear will break us, but fear is nothing compared to what we carry. We are not fighting for Earth alone. We are fighting for every voice they tried to silence." His crew, tired and scarred, nodded. No one spoke of retreat. Outside, the enemy waited. The Empire had gathered their last strength, a fleet so large it seemed to blot out the stars. The sky itself looked swallowed by metal. And yet, the humans moved forward. The first volleys shook the void. Light tore across the darkness, ships burned, and shadows broke. Human ships were small compared to the Empire's war machines, but they struck fast with fury and precision. Every loss was met with another strike. Every fall answered with fire. The galaxy watched in silence. Worlds long enslaved turned their eyes to the battle. For the first time in centuries, they felt something dangerous. Hope. On the flagship, alarms screamed. The hull cracked. Systems failed. But Rains stood tall, refusing to flinch. "Push forward," he roared. "They will break before we do." And he was right. The Empire had never known an enemy like this. They had crushed rebellions. They had slaughtered fleets. But never had they faced a force that refused surrender, even when the cost was death. Humanity fought like a storm, tearing into the heart of the enemy fleet. Suddenly, a message flashed across the human comms. Not from Earth. Not from their own fleet. It came from the broken survivors scattered across the stars. 1,000 voices, trembling but strong. "We rise with you." One by one, old ships, stolen craft, even half-broken, vessels joined the fight. Races once silenced by fear flew beside humanity. Weak, small, unarmed. But they came, and the balance began to shift. The Empire's command ship shuddered as fire consumed it. The last of their admirals screamed orders, but it was too late. Their fleet broke apart, scattered by the storm they could not stop. On the human flagship, silence fell as the battle ended. The crew looked out into the quiet void, into the burning remains of the Empire. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Rains whispered, almost to himself, "The forgotten cry is no longer forgotten." The stars seemed to listen. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. Worlds long enslaved broke their chains. Survivors rose from the ashes. And wherever hope began, one word was whispered. One word that carried fire in its sound. Humanity. They had answered the plea no one else heard. They had risen in fire when all others turned away. And now, they were no longer alone. The galaxy would remember. Forever. The final dawn had come, and humanity was the light.